On Tuesday, April 22, 1986, Sharon Schultz was eagerly awaiting the return of her younger sister Robin from school. It was Sharon's 26th birthday, and the sisters had planned to spend some fun time together, having lunch and shopping. Robin was supposed to come home on the school bus at 3:15 p.m., no later than 3:30 p.m., but she still hadn't arrived. At 3:30 p.m., Sharon answered a call from one of Robin's school friends, 15-year-old Warren Paxton Brown, whom everyone called Paxton. He briefly asked if Robin was home, and Sharon replied that her sister hadn't returned yet. Paxton said he would call back later before hanging up. If Sharon wasn't worried before, she now began to frequently glance at the clock, wondering where her younger sister could be. Robin's strange absence was reported to her mother, Nancy. The woman immediately left work and called friends and relatives, but no one had heard anything about Robin. Then the mother organized a search for her daughter, involving not only family members but also Robin's friends, including Paxton and her close friend and neighbor, 15-year-old Michelle Jackson. Unfortunately, they couldn't find her, and that same evening at 10:15 p.m., the family reported Robin's disappearance to the police in Berea, Ohio. On Wednesday, April 23rd at 3:35 p.m., a fisherman who decided to fish in a river 8 kilometers from Robin's home came upon a horrifying scene. He found the body of a very young girl lying face down in the water, covered only by a green sheet. There was nothing else. The fisherman called the police, and the body was taken away. Now, someone had to identify the victim. This difficult task fell to Robin's brothers, Ken and Rick. The detective warned them that he was certain it was their sister, but everything had to be done officially. They were given a few minutes to prepare and were then invited inside. The body was covered. When the sheet was removed, there was no doubt. It was Robin. Although Rick was only 23 years old at the time, he took on the role of head of the family, and the sorrowful duty of informing their mother that her daughter had died fell on his shoulders. 13-year-old Robin Starfield was the first child born from her mother's second marriage. The girl's father tragically died of a heart attack just a year after she was born. Her mother was devastated by her husband's death, but her 5 other children from her previous marriage were more than happy to help raise their little sister. Although the girl grew up without a father, her mother, brothers, and sisters created a loving home where everyone supported each other. Robin grew up to be kind, compassionate, and sociable. She enjoyed participating in various sports, such as running, gymnastics, softball, and cheerleading. However, now the entire family had to face the terrible truth. Robin had become the victim of a crime. The coroner concluded that Robin had been strangled. No signs of sexual assault were found. But the main problem arose in determining the time of death. The night Robin disappeared was very cold, and the river water was freezing, which created certain challenges. Nevertheless, according to the pathologist, Robin had been held somewhere overnight and spent about 4 hours in the water. This meant she had died on the day she was found, April 23rd. No evidence was found at the crime scene near the body. The police could only hope that the one clue, the green sheet, would lead them to the killer. Initially, they believed it was a hotel sheet, which meant the crime had taken place there. However, after visiting local hotels, they found that none of them had similar bed linen. Meanwhile, the police found a witness who believed they had seen the girl on her bicycle with 17-year-old Frank Zelenka around 4 p.m. on the day she disappeared. Rumors were circulating that the two young people had feelings for each other. Gossipers speculated that Frank might know something about the murder. Furthermore, a week before the tragedy, Robin's concerned friend Paxton had called her family, warning them to keep Robin away from Frank. He was worried that Frank might harm her. It's unclear what actions the family took in response to this warning, but after her body was found, suspicion immediately fell on Frank. However, he had an alibi. At the same time, the police quickly discovered why Robin hadn't gotten off the school bus near her home as usual. Other students revealed that she had exited the bus 1 block before her house. Moreover, she wasn't alone. With her were 14-year-old Jimmy Martin and Paxton. The 3 friends briefly stopped by Paxton's house to listen to music, but Jimmy left after just 15 minutes, and shortly after, Robin left as well. When she stepped out the door, she was crying. This was reported by Charlene and Winifred Murphy, Paxton's aunt and grandmother, who were at the house at the time. Since Paxton was one of the last people to see Robin alive, investigators spoke with him. The young man openly admitted that he and Robin were more than just friends. They had been dating for 3 months. They usually went home together on the school bus, But on the day Robin disappeared, she suddenly had the idea to get off the bus early so her mother wouldn't see them together. Apparently, Paxton wasn't well liked by Robin's family because he was older than her, so the two had to keep their relationship a secret. After hearing Paxton's explanation, the detectives wondered why he hadn't mentioned Jimmy or the fact that there were 3 of them together that day. When asked directly about this, he calmly confirmed that his friend had indeed come to his house, but left after his grandmother and aunt returned. He added that Jimmy had stopped by again around 5 p.m. Paxton continued his account, confessing that he and Robin had decided they no longer wanted to continue their relationship. The conversation had been emotional, so much so that Robin was crying when she ran out of his house. Paxton waited 10 minutes before calling Robin's home. That's when Robin's sister Sharon told him that Robin hadn't returned yet. Paxton made a few more calls, but no one had seen Robin. Finally, around 9:30 p.m., he visited her friend Michelle, and together they went to ask Frank Zelenka if he knew where Robin was. He hadn't seen her either. Michelle and Paxton continued searching for their friend, but to no avail. Detectives also spoke with Jimmy, who confirmed that on the day of Robin's disappearance, April 22nd, he had gone to Paxton's house with Robin, then left and didn't see his friends again. Just to be sure, the officers checked the alibis of both boys and found out that on the morning of April 23rd, the day of the murder, they were in school, which their classmates and teachers could confirm. The investigators couldn't shake the feeling that no one was telling the whole truth in this case, and this suspicion only grew stronger when they learned about another potential suspect, 15-year-old Michelle, Robin's close friend and neighbor. Robin's family noticed that Michelle didn't show much emotion upon hearing about her friend's death. They believed that Michelle never really liked their daughter and was jealous of the feelings that had developed between Robin and Frank. By a strange coincidence, the so-called friends had quarreled just before Robin's mysterious disappearance. Robin felt betrayed when she found out that Michelle and Paxton had secretly kissed, though it's unclear whether this happened while Robin and Paxton were dating or not. Regardless, Robin was furious and even wrote Michelle a note in which she insulted her. Michelle's response was far worse. She replied to Robin with a letter of her own, equally harsh in tone, and at the end, she drew something that sent chills down the spine, a disturbing picture of a gravestone with Robin's name on it. When questioned by the police, Michelle explained that the drawing symbolized the end of their friendship and nothing more. However, the detectives' suspicions deepened, especially given the possibility that Michelle and Paxton's relationship might have developed behind Robin's back. Regarding Robin's belongings, on the morning of Wednesday, April 23rd, before her body was found, Paxton called the girl's family and said that he had found her bag at his house. He offered to bring it over, but Robin's sister Sharon volunteered to pick it up herself. As she was walking down the street, a car pulled up beside her. Inside were Paxton, Michelle, and another friend. Paxton handed Sharon the bag and explained that actually his aunt, Charlene, had found it on his bed. Sharon decided to press him for more information and advised him to confess if he knew anything else, warning him that he might have to take a polygraph test. Paxton, however, shocked her even more by casually stating that such tests were nothing new to him and that he had already taken a lie detector test 3 times. This strange response shifted Sharon's suspicions abruptly from Michelle to Paxton. Sharon couldn't have known at the time, but 15-year-old Paxton had a very troubled past. He was a problematic child who had been expelled from school multiple times. Paxton and his friends were bullies, often targeting younger kids and even engaging in arson. He wasn't afraid to resort to violence, even against his own mother, which made his family fearful of him, especially his 29-year-old Aunt Charlene. Rumor had it that in order to avoid angering her nephew, Charlene would buy alcohol for him and his friends. After failing all his exams once again, Paxton's situation started to deteriorate rapidly. It was at this point that the kind and compassionate Robin stepped in. She was aware of his wild tendencies and hoped to bring some stability to his life by offering to help him with his schoolwork. Almost immediately, Robin's family and friends noticed a change in Paxton's behavior, and for the first time, his life seemed to be improving. After taking the bag from Paxton, Sharon continued to his house, hoping to speak with Charlene. Sharon asked her where she had found the bag, and initially, Paxton's aunt said she had found it on the street. She quickly corrected herself, saying it was actually at the house. Sharon then inquired when Charlene had last seen her sister. Charlene claimed that Robin had never entered the house and had only talked to Paxton outside. However, she soon revised her statement again, adding that Robin had been in the house for only a few minutes. No, 25 minutes. After such a conversation, Sharon left with even more questions than she had arrived with. She hurried to tell her brother Rick everything. Rick, accompanied by two friends, found Paxton on the street. Paxton attempted to avoid them, but Rick caught up with him, grabbed him by the collar, and demanded that he tell everything. Rick shouted, "It's time for you to start talking. You need to tell me everything. It's in your best interest for us to find her and for her to be alive." Paxton looked at him with a cold, vacant stare and asked, "Alive?" Rick, enraged, lunged at Paxton with his fists, and his friends barely managed to pull him off. Rick was convinced that the young man was involved in his sister's disappearance, and when her body was found, his suspicions were only reinforced. However, he couldn't do anything about it because Paxton had a solid alibi. On the third day of the investigation, the police had nothing new except for Robin's body wrapped in a green sheet. Suddenly, they received a call they had been waiting for. A man in a neighboring town had attempted to abduct a teenager and was successfully apprehended. Why did they think there might be a connection? Because the man had tried to kidnap a 14-year-old blonde girl who looked very much like Robin. The investigators rushed to the local jail. The man claimed he had recently moved to the area and had never been to Berea. Finally, the detectives were fed up with dealing with this suspect. One of them showed him a photo of Robin and threatened him with prison, even with execution for her murder. The man remained adamant. He had nothing to do with it. He hadn't even been close to the city, and several colleagues confirmed that he had been at work during the hours before and after her disappearance. He could not be their killer. This turned out to be yet another dead end. It seemed that all the suspects in the case had solid alibis. Reviewing the witness statements, detectives noticed a detail they had initially missed. Paxton claimed that Jimmy left his house a little earlier than Robin and then returned around 5 p.m. However, according to Jimmy, he hadn't seen his friends again that day. Deciding to re-interview Jimmy, the detectives learned from his father that the son had been out of sorts in recent days, clearly troubled by something. The detectives suspected he knew more than he was letting on, and they were right. When Jimmy finally revealed what he had witnessed, the case took a dramatic turn. The young man confessed that on Sunday, April 20th, 2 days before Robin's disappearance, Paxton had told him that he intended to mess with and kill Robin because, in his view, she had used him. He asked Jimmy to help him. Since Jimmy didn't believe that Paxton was serious, he reluctantly agreed. Little did he know that Paxton had already made a dreadful decision. If he couldn't be with Robin, then he would make sure that no one could. Furthermore, the young man had mentioned the planned crime to his aunt, Charlene, who had only laughed it off. Charlene refused to believe the shocking claim, having no idea what state of mind her nephew was in. Had people looked more closely, they would have realized the extent of his malevolence, but that realization came only when it was too late. Thanks to Jimmy's very detailed account, the truth about what happened on Tuesday, April 22nd, came to light, and it was much more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. Returning from school on the bus, Paxton and Robin sat together in the back seats, with Jimmy in front of them. During the ride, Paxton began to build up his courage, hinting to Jimmy about what was about to happen. Paxton lured Robin to his house under the pretense of her listening to a cassette. She agreed. When the three of them arrived at Paxton's house, he instructed Jimmy to turn up the volume on the radio. Jimmy complied. Paxton then sat on the bed next to Robin. The young man asked her to rekindle their romantic relationship, but Robin refused. When she tried to leave the room, Paxton blocked her way and refused to let her out. The girl began to cry and tried to escape again. When she failed, Robin struck Paxton on the head. She screamed as he dragged her back to the bed. The young man was much taller and stronger than the frail, petite Robin. He easily threw her to the floor. Holding one hand on her throat and the other over her mouth, he asked Jimmy for help. Terrified, Jimmy said he did not want to be involved in the attack. As Robin struggled for her life, Paxton shook her, banging her head against the floor to make her lose consciousness. After a few minutes, Paxton released her, but she was still alive. In horror, Jimmy told his friend he was leaving. Paxton threatened to kill his entire family and burn down the house if he told anyone what he had seen. Then he demanded that Jimmy call Charlene. Jimmy relayed the request to Charlene and ran out of the house. Since Jimmy could only guess what happened next, the detectives decided to question Charlene. As it turned out, she had been keeping many secrets. The young woman was practically incoherent and recounted everything in minute detail. When Jimmy fled down the stairs, Charlene went up to Paxton's room. She saw him sitting on the floor next to Robin's body. She was naked and had only her underwear and a top on. Her skin had turned blue. Charlene was at a loss for words to ask what had happened. Paxton said he was finishing it up and then said, "I need to talk to Jimmy," and ran outside. Charlene was left alone with Robin's body in horror. Paxton's mother, Linda, returned home around 4:30 p.m., which her son did not expect. Charlene did not tell her about the crime that had happened right upstairs and did not call the police, fearing how Paxton would react. A few minutes after his mother arrived, Paxton told his family he would be in his room for the next 2 hours and demanded not to be disturbed. During this time, his mother left the house again, and Paxton saw an opportunity to talk to Charlene so that his mother could not overhear the conversation. He asked her to come upstairs, where she found Robin fully naked on the bedroom floor. The two of them did not know what to do next. In the end, Paxton folded the victim's clothes into a bag, and Charlene handed him a green sheet from the closet. Paxton wrapped Robin in the sheet, and the two of them carried the body downstairs and placed it in Charlene's van. They drove to Robin's house, where Robin's sister Sharon came out with her German Shepherd. The young man asked how the search for the girl was progressing. Interestingly, he never asked if Robin had returned home, but rather if they had found her. The dog was going wild, barking and growling. Sharon thought it was because the dog did not like Paxton, but it turned out that Robin's body was only a few steps away. Paxton told Sharon that he and his aunt would also try to search for Robin. In reality, they headed to a bridge over the river in the park. There, they disposed of Robin's body. They then stopped at a dumpster behind a store, where Paxton discarded her clothes. Afterward, the aunt and nephew returned home around 9 p.m. Thus, Robin was killed before 4 p.m. on the day of her disappearance, 12 hours earlier than previously suspected. Due to the icy water in the river where the body was found, the pathologist was mistaken, which significantly slowed the investigation. In the days following, Paxton, Charlene, and Jimmy lied to the family, Robin's friends, and the police about what happened. No one could have imagined the twisted thoughts of the 15-year-old boy and his insane ideas that Robin's life only mattered if she was with him. On May 1st, 1986, Paxton and his aunt were arrested. While in custody, the young man wrote a letter attempting to provide his version of the events. However, much of what he wrote did not match the accounts of Jimmy and Charlene. He tried to blame anyone but himself for the murder, claiming that the girl had struck him with a baseball bat, prompting him to grab the bat and hit her in return. However, the pathologist determined that the cause of death was strangulation. Paxton was tried as an adult and charged with murder with aggravating circumstances. Of course, the prosecutor feared that the defendant's young age might work in his favor, but the testimony of Jimmy and Charlene was so full of shocking details that Paxton was found guilty. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 20 years. His 29-year-old aunt, Charlene, who had helped her nephew dispose of the body, pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence and was sentenced to 5 years probation. The Robin family found this a mockery of justice. Charlene, who was a mother herself, revealed that she had heard disturbing noises from the bedroom but did not even get up to see what was happening. She then helped her murderer nephew dispose of the body of the 13-year-old victim. 37 years have passed since Robin's murder, and Paxton claims to have become a new person and reformed, but the victim's family does not believe this and does everything possible to ensure that each time the parole board denies him release. Paxton does not give up and has created a petition for his release. He admitted to his actions, saying, "I committed this crime, I take full responsibility for it, and I know there is nothing I can do to bring Robin back." Nevertheless, he asked concerned people to sign the petition to give him a second chance. The Robin family quickly shut down these attempts by creating their own petition against his release. As long as they can keep their daughter's killer behind bars, they will do everything possible to ensure it remains that way in the future.